Hey guys, Board now back with you, and on this video I will be running down the final part of my top 50 science fiction movies. So this is going to be part 5 and it's going to be 10 to 1 naturally, so I will finish off the list. It's been a blast doing this. And at the end of the video, before I announce my number 1, I will run down the complete list, so 50 to 2 and then on to my number 1. So looking forward to that. Obviously get involved as always, but I'm going to get started. I'm going to go in with my number 10. And at number 10, a more recent film than some on this list, but it's one of those films that I've watched a lot since it got released, sort of just under 20 years ago now, and I think it is one of the best modern films anyway. A total masterpiece, in my opinion anyway, and that is Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, in at number 10 from 2004. So we have this very kind of playful, ambitious, almost Philip K. Dick sort of like idea behind the film, where the basic premise is then there's this new technology where you can have like an implant in your mind that can erase a relationship, a whole relationship, so the memory of it. So it's this sort of it sort of poses these like conundrums to do. Well, would you really do this? Would this appeal to someone if this technology was really available? So we get this very downtrodden guy played by Jim Carrey, and he's the one who's decided to have this treatment. But along the way there are complications, and the film sort of depicts that. And when things are thrown up, he obviously starts having relapses and kind of questions whether it was the best sort of recourse. So the film has a very sort of non-linear type structure. It really plays about and jumps about in time and in sort of just the structure of the story. So great concept. It really makes you think about these things. First thing to say is Jim Carrey is absolutely fantastic. Now, if you're like me and you're not really a big fan of his like normal, like straight comedy work, then this is probably the film for you. It's like a real alternative to that. It's kind of an alternative rom-com in a way, which just happens to be like this, quite ambitious like sci-fi film. But yeah, Carrey's just amazing in it. He completely transforms himself. He completely embodies this character. He's just like this, as I said, this completely like deadpan, downtrodden sort of guy. Really takes himself to extreme sort of levels. I think he's great because he just strikes you as an everyday sort of guy. So you feel his pain, but yeah, I think he's engaging, even though at times the character comes across as very self-indulgent and a bit self-loathing and quite a miserable character to spend time with, but you still sort of root for him and like him. You're still interested in him, I think. Kate Winslet, very good as normal, as she plays obviously Clementine, the love interest of the film. She brings a lot of energy to that role, a very complex character too, and I love the little touches of her different hair colours. So depending on her mood or the mood of the scene, she has a different hair colour. So that's just one of those quirky little touches of this film, which I just love. You've got a brilliant supporting cast. Tom Wilkinson, reliably good as the Doctor. Mark Ruffalo's in there. Kirsten Dunst. Jane Addams, who I think is a very underrated actress. She was in the film Happiness, but she has a small role. So casting is just brilliant, and I think it's one of these films that just celebrates kind of the endless possibilities of filmmaking and of storytelling in general. So it just really plays with these ideas and these expectations, and just visually the way it pushes itself. But it has a very distinct look where it's almost quite photogenic and washed out, and it obviously is very dreamlike because at times you're going into the head of this character, you're going into his memories, and it tackles how unreliable, memory can be. But yeah, it does have something quite photoreal about it, just something quite raw about the visuals, which is to do with, again, memory and us being quite nostalgic and remembering stuff. And it's just beautifully designed, really stunning music. I love the contrast in like the weather conditions in it, like the contrast of them being on the beach in one scene and then the snow in the other, and that sort of famous shot which appears on like the DVD cover, I think, depending on what version you get, but with them just laying in the snow making shape. So a lot of detail, went into like the visual look of the film and the sets and everything. And again, it's all about the human condition, all about these various ideas. And it's one of these where I think, depending on your frame of mind or how you view the film, it could either be seen as like this just totally like beautiful, like romantic, playful film, or it can be seen as as much bleaker and darker and that, and it's kind of both. But depending on your point of view, it could be, you could view it as either. But it's an interesting film where it does fit into this kind of alternative rom-com type thing, but obviously with a much more complex science fiction type plot. But it's a stunning film. Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. At number 9, it's actually the first film in the top 10 of 2, which is, in my opinion, better than the remake. And it's my first Cronenberg film on this list. It is The Fly. So his remake from the 80s. So we have a classic Cronenbergian body horror, but with this tragic like romance sort of thrown into the mix, which I think is what gives it a different sort of feel than some of his other films. So it takes that quite a simple like sci-fi premise and just twists it into like something more radical and ambitious. It redefined Jeff Goldblum, I think, as like this kind of like this nerd, but this nerd with real energy and an edge and sort of sex appeal. I mean, and that in a way led to him getting the role in Jurassic Park, even though that was quite a few years ago. But even so, I think this was maybe a turning point for Goldblum's career. He has great chemistry with Gina Davis. Someone said apparently they were married at the time or were seeing each other. So that makes sense when you see the film. But she's fantastic, as she always is, and I think she really pulls you into the film emotionally. If you weren't quite on board with him, if you find him a bit too awkward and not totally like likable or engaging, I think she does that work for them. She sort of sells you on their relationship and what's at stake. And it's funny, a film like this, which is so about the sci-fi elements and the horror elements and just like the monster movie type stuff and the satire. But you also have this sort of engaging, compelling like romance at the heart of it, but just this tragedy to it. As the film goes on, you sort of get the sense, this maybe isn't going to end so well. Some great hammy dialogue as well. It's a film that has a lot of fun with itself as well as the more serious stuff. So I love Gina Davis and her delivery of the line, "Be afraid, be very afraid." That's almost like a classic nod to like monster movie and B movie type dialogue. And it was even the tagline, I think, but she delivers it to perfection. I love that scene. Great practical effect as well. The 80s was like the era for like proper killer like practical effects in sci-fi and horror. It's so fleshy, so deep. The design of when he finally becomes the Fly is just amazing. So really pulpy, likable sci-fi fun. The Fly is my number 9. And at number 8, speaking of the 80s and kind of classic like B-movie type premises or great practical effects, certainly, we have John Carpenter's The Thing. So I said The Fly is an example of a remake better than the original. And this can be said for The Thing as well. Again, the original The Thing, which was Thing from Another Place, which I think 1950s, that sounds about right. Perfectly enjoyable film. I like it generally, but yeah, this is very different and this is even better. I think classic Carpenter. It has one of those timeless like bottle movie type premises, and it's been used so many times since, including in one of my favourite ever X-Files episode, that being Ice from season 1. Absolutely love that episode, and that's something I'll be doing on the channel one day. I'll be reviewing the X-Files, so you can look forward to that. Kurt Russell has rarely been better. So many great roles with Carpenter, but him and that flamethrower just kick ass. So good. A whole bunch of fine, like, supporting character actors involved. Each character kind of having their own sort of stick, if you like. And it properly builds the tension throughout the film. It does this good job of like only showing the monster in like small sort of fragments, so a slow sort of reveal. It's this classic sort of premise or like idea of how you do it over the course of the film, so that when things unfold and he finally or it finally gets to the killing and we see more of it means more is basically what I'm saying. Again, amazing practical effects, maybe even better than The Fly. Certainly some freaky shit in this film which just looks awesome. And the music as well, of course. Any Carpenter film wouldn't be complete without the music, which is like a character in its own. And I think the main theme to The Thing is just one of his best. It's absolutely terrifying. You just hear the opening notes and it just scares the shit out of you. Awesome stuff again. And it did grow on me. You know, first time I saw this film, I wasn't so into it. But I've watched it a couple more times since, and yeah, I think it's really fantastic and stands up as one of Carpenter's best films. And pretty much a true. I mean, obviously it's based on an older film, but I think what Carpenter did with that original premise and then moved it forward and put his own style on it. So, yeah, pretty damn original and one of the best examples of this type of film. So that's The Thing. And number 7, I've gone back to Cronenberg. So you might have guessed I'm a really big David Cronenberg fan. And one of his big hitters again, this is Videodrome from 1983. So this sort of cult classic, surreal and creepy visual look at the future, but a potent satire as well. I mean, essentially he predicted the way online culture would go. He predicted certain things about the internet, even though he denies it, but the themes are there. So he might have done it accidentally, but it just shows you what a visionary Cronenberg has been at his best. And it really nails a lot of the stuff to do with like the media and consumer products and that whole thing, like the scene with, you know, the designer glasses and that whole setup. So really some smart like satire going on, very, very sharp, really ahead of its time, considering this is the early 80s. James Woods has rarely been better. This is one of his best performances. He's on top form as this very manic, paranoid TV exec. who is slowly overcome by this stuff. Debbie Harry in one of her first screen roles is just perfectly cast. It's designed beautifully. The whole virtual reality realm and the design of like the dream sequences, the colours is just so like potent and eye popping. Really great sets, and it has a really intriguing plot and goes to some intriguing places, some good twists and turns along the way in tension. And the ending I just love. I think it's the perfect payoff. It really leaves the mind to sort of wonder. I know some people maybe think the ending is a bit flat, a bit of a cop out maybe, but not for me. I like it a lot. So one of Cronenberg's best films, for me anyway, that's Videodrome at number 7. Number 6, I've gone to the mainstream end of things now. My number 6 is Jurassic Park. So Spielberg at the peak of his powers, one of his very best films. I think this and Jaws are basically like neck and neck for me as his best. I might just go for Jaws, but this is very close. This is, first of all, I think a big reason why this is so high on my list is because it has this nostalgia for me going to see it as a kid, because when it came out at the cinema, I was like the target age for it, really, because I was like 12 or 13. So that was the perfect sort of age to see this film, because it obviously has huge like commercial appeal. It has that classic Spielberg like sense of wonder, and it really captures that boy like sort of kind of innocence and charm that a lot of his great films do. But at the same time, it's something a bit more challenging at times. It's obviously, when it needs to be, it's a very scary film as well, for a Spielberg film anyway. The horror elements do work well. So yeah, that's kind of why it works so well. But I just remember going to see this when it first came out, and just being so wrapped up in it and just so gripped by it. This is really the definitive like version of dinosaurs on the big screen. I mean, Spielberg just nailed it, and I don't think anyone has ever done it as good. And just the fact that it was actually scary and quite graphic at times, I think that really helped as well. But I can remember seeing it at the cinema twice, going once with my mum and once with my brother. And I remember, just like a memory from childhood, I can remember in between the two visits, I went to another film at the same cinema, and I just remember halfway through it or something, we could hear the dinosaurs from Jurassic Park in like the next screening or something. They were so sort of loud, but it was brilliant. Just one of those like memories you have. But fun times, it really. So nostalgia plays a big part, but it's clearly a film that's held up, because I've seen it a few times since. I went to see it at the cinema a few years ago when it was reissued. Holds up just as well. It's a great story. You've got great characters. Jeff Goldblum has said, Laura Dern, Sam Neill, who has a nice little arc because he starts off as this grouch and then ends up as this more lovable family guy. And that kind of like encapsulates Sam Neill, what a skilled actor he is, because you totally buy him as both version of the character. And the kids are really great as well, because, sometimes that can let this sort of film down, and it is difficult casting good kids, but they just feel really natural when you believe in them as like brother and sister. They do a really good job. That's it's almost like a family film completely in that sense. The way you've got casting for all the different age ranges, because obviously you've got the Attenborough character as well, and so on screen they really give a lot of attention to the casting and just getting that right. So it almost feels like a family that you're following, literally. Tremendous John Williams theme once again. It's just beautiful. And as I said, just scary. And it does feel like that sort of roller coaster sort of ride, which is sort of that you think of being classic Spielberg, because you have those moments where you like ease into it and cruise along, and there's obviously some good comedy, so you enjoy those moments, but then out of nowhere you have like you get the up and down, so almost like you're on a roller coaster. You're like going along steadily, then up, down, sudden movements, and it pulls the rug out from under you at a certain point, and the horror elements do work. So like the scene in the kitchen where they're just being hiding in cupboards and just being as quiet as possible, and that just adds tension to the whole thing, because if they make one sudden movement or if they slip, whatever the case may be, then they're basically in danger. So the horror elements work really well. The dinosaurs are just so vivid, they're beautifully designed but terrifying as well. And a great little 3-act sort of structure. The plot is pretty much perfect. So, yeah, Jurassic Park. Yeah, absolutely love it. Great value on rewatches. So that's my number 6. So we're into the top 5 now. My number 5, a lot of 80s cinema in this part of the list, and in general, I think. But it's The Terminator from 1984. And so I'm in the minority because I think The Terminator, the original, is better than Terminator 2. And the main reason I think that is because I just think it's a tighter film. I think the script is more tight and just so functional, and gets what it sort of does what it needs to do. It has these great sort of concepts, this original idea at the heart of it, but it's just paced to perfection, and it nails all the little beats it needs to do, but it never overextends itself really, apart from one example which I'll go into, which isn't really to do with the script, but it's just this great example of this original concept from a Hollywood film, which actually didn't cost that much when comparably with some other blockbusters, and it made a huge amount of money. Again, it's great, should be a wake-up call to Hollywood, because this is what they need to start doing again. Otherwise, that threat from television and streaming isn't going to go away, so they're going to struggle if they don't if they don't pay attention to history. But yeah, it's the film that made Arnie cool and bankable. He's so charismatic in this. He looks the part. So smart and self-aware. The script allows him to be quite playful, but at the same time, you just know he's a badass and a killer, and still scary. He still looks the part, even though he does get some nice little moments of comedy and moments where he's just kind of cool. And Arnie does a great job. Physically, he really embodies that character, and it's actually a really good performance, I think, which gets overlooked sometimes. But a simple sort of sci-fi premise, which with some great futuristic ideas, also turns into a bit of a slasher movie in the way it plays out, with him stalking them across the city. But that just works so well. Again, awesome action set pieces, like Arnie the Terminator stalking through the police station, just mowing down everything in his way. Also the scene in the nightclub with that catchy, cheesy 80s song playing. Just all works really well, really tense moments. And we get that really special relationship between Linda Hamilton as Sarah Connor and Michael Biehn as Kyle Reese. And that's another example where I think the script really nails it, because first of all, it justifies having them become a thing, if you like. It happens quite late in the film anyway, but it justifies their relationship. because of the way the film's ends and the twist. So there is a legitimate plot reason for it. But also you build their relationship over the course of the film. So by the time they get to that point, you really believe in it and you're really sold. But it doesn't get in the way. Sometimes with these films, they'll be like, well, we've got an attractive man, we've got an attractive woman. Why not just throw them together just for the hell of it? And, to add more drama. It just becomes this kind of old-fashioned sort of thing where, yeah, they're spending a lot of time together, so let's just have them get together. And sometimes it feels forced and distracts from the main plot. But this never does. It actually adds to the main plot. But at the same time, it's not overdone. It's a credible relationship that is given just the right amount of space. And I love the way they build over the course of the film their characters and their bond. And great, feminist character, Sarah Connor. It was sort of ahead of its time in this sort of action sci-fi type cinema, and Linda Hamilton knocks it out the park. And I like her arc over the course of the film, the fact that she's sort of this badass at the end, but she's come a long way from how vulnerable she is at the beginning. And then I kind of like the fact that we see her at the start of T2 as a full-blown badass, just raging and almost taking over the Kyle Reese role. So she's having this meltdown in the police station. So, yeah, gotta love that shit. But Linda Hamilton is awesome in this film and in Terminator 2. And, did a pretty good job in the recent Terminator as well. But in any case, really, really good casting, really good concept, and it just works to perfection like clockwork. I love that main theme tune. And I think one small complaint is, I think maybe this is a budget theme, but the scenes in the future don't look so good. They don't really hold up. They feel a bit murky. I think you could argue, do we need them anyway? Could they have just been explained in the present? But, it's one of these things, and they don't take up too much time, but I think that they do look a bit bad. That's maybe where the money ran out a bit, and they didn't quite have the budget to do those scenes properly. But it's a small complaint. It doesn't take me out of the film. I still think the film is pretty damn flawless. So there you have it. That's Terminator, my number 5. And my number 4, we go into the 1970s now, early 70s. This is Stanley Kubrick's A Clockwork Orange. So I have a very mixed thing with Kubrick because, I still need to see a lot of his films, but there's some I really like, some I really hate. They just leave me cold. And I think part of my issue with Kubrick is then he lacks that sort of emotional connection as a director. Those films, they're too maybe cold and clinical, and it's almost like they're too good in a way, in a funny sort of way. And what I mean by that is they're too technically I can't say the word. They're too technically accomplished. I'll say that one since my teeth are falling out. But yeah, so it's almost like it's so much about the visual spectacle and the world, then sometimes you don't have the story or characters. They just leave me, just could be a bit more feeling. Now in this case, because it's like this dystopian sci-fi, looking ahead to the future, and it's so much about violence and mortality, and it's more of a satire. So I think because it's all about that, and it sort of has fun with that, and it subverts your expectations many times as well, then I think that makes it easier as a watch, because you know that, and you have that all the way through. Comes from an Anthony Burgess novel. The ending to the novel is actually very different from the ending of this film. And yeah, as I was saying, it really puts a subversive sort of satirical like twist on the themes and the characters. It has this daring, bold, like nightmarish vision of the future, but it creates like this whole subculture of the Droogs and just the way they look and the style of the film and the music and the language. It sort of predicts a lot of like modern slang, and a lot of it seems to have been bang on, but whatever the case, the fact is it has a great vision and it follows through on that, and it stood the test of time and people still talk about the film and remember it now. And it just one of these provocative films that just plays with your emotions, really sets you up to expect one thing, does very, and is just poking at these situations, like just getting under your skin, challenging you to sort of think. And sometimes that can be a bit pretentious and a bit like grating or annoying, but it just works so well in this film. It's just so well like directed and planned and thought out, and just has these really sharp, like satirical points that it makes so well. Malcolm McDowell as Alex, like this perfect anti-hero. He's a great like fully rounded character, and his performance, his like physicality is just brilliant. He nails it. He's a great actor anyway, but he's never been better than as Alex in A Clockwork Orange. His narration is great as well throughout the film. It really adds something a bit different. And I think it's one of the best films in just shocking people to think, but in a perverse kind of way. Doesn't really offer up any easy answers. I think there's a lot of black and white to the characters, but it has a lot to say on like society and punishment and institutions. It has a lot to say on class, and at the very end the media. I absolutely love that ending. Might be one of my favourite endings to any film. And I think the closing credit scenes is one of my favourite closing credit scenes to any film as well. But just using like Singing in the Rain and like this romantic, like glorious song, and just twisting it into something perverse and sinister is just brilliant. And I think there's two great examples, or my two favourite examples of doing that is this and when David Lynch did it with In Dreams in Blue Velvet. So similar sort of idea, taking this kind of romantic, well-loved song and just the context is just so sinister and down and dirty and really good, really sinister. So to do that is absolutely brilliant, and you sort of leave the cinema like skipping away to Singing in the Rain, but then you're kind of like, yeah, should I be doing this? But awesome stuff. It's one of Kubrick's very best films in my opinion. So Clockwork Orange is number 4. Now, by the way, before I go any further, you will not see Doctor Strangelove on this list, and I know some people argue for it as sci-fi, but not me. No, for me, it's not a sci-fi. There may be, you can say there's science fiction type elements, but overall, I think it's more of a satire, and yeah, there's not enough science in it for me for it to be a sci-fi. So yeah, there you have Kubrick at number 4 with A Clockwork Orange. So into the top 3. Here we go. And another big hitter, really, of this sort of era in films. We have Ridley Scott's Alien. So this, in my opinion, is Ridley Scott's masterpiece. I obviously had Blade Runner at number 20, which I still like a lot, but think is a bit overrated. But for me, this is true masterpiece. And yeah, obviously I had the sequel Aliens earlier in the list, which is a really strong sequel. So perfection through and through. The designs of the world, the look of the script, the alien design is just fantastic. It's one of the most distinct creatures ever of cinema, and I think something's a great film when even the tagline is like one of the best ever. So in space no one can hear you scream. I think everyone knows that tagline and they know it comes from Alien, even if they've never seen the film itself. So that's kind of a throwback where the tagline is almost as big as the film, and it's a great example of what makes a classic film. Then it's down to the tagline as well as what's in the actual film. But everyone knows that tagline, I think. And this is just this great merge of really ambitious, really beautiful science fiction, but mixed with this like terrifying, claustrophobic, like horror type premise. It's perfectly paced. The psychology is just spot on. It's really well cast. You've got all these great character actors, a bit like The Thing, but even better, where you just have distinct personalities that stand out, and they all add a bit something different to the plot. You've got the late John Hurt, you've got Tom Skerritt, for Veronica Cartwright, Harry Dean Stanton, another actor who sadly passed away in recent. Just really, really impressive casting. Ian Holm as well. And one of the things that is maybe most impressive is the fact that at the start of the film you don't really know Sigourney Weaver is the lead character, as in the human. I suppose technically the alien's the lead, but from the human characters, she's just set up as like another crew member, just one of the crew. And then the character takes on a life of its own over the course of the film. And it's a real surprise, and she's just amazing. It's obviously her star-making turn that just made her a much bigger star. And again, similar to the Sarah Connor character in Terminator, the Ellen Ripley character was just ahead of its time for females in sci-fi. At this point, very rarely would you see like a strong commanding lead female in sci-fi, whether it be on TV or movies, and she just nails it. She's just so understated, just so subtle, just really believable, but she has this edge to her as well, this sort of tough side. She's really smart and physically yet capable, and just amazing. Just a great performance, a great character that you just grow to love over the course of the film. There's surprises along the way, there's scary moments, there's beautiful moments. The music again is really, really impressive. The whole thing, it just shows you what Ridley Scott does at his best, and he just designs and creates this whole new world, and you're just sucked into it. It's just a thing of beauty, the way it functions, and as I said, the pacing and the script. Just so many little touches. Now, the music was by Jerry Goldsmith, who I have to say had a killer year that year, because it's the same year that he produced Star Trek The Motion Picture soundtrack, which is probably one of my favourite soundtracks. So he had one hell of a year that year. He's done some great music. And again, I sort of appreciate the slasher type element as well, but only that it was an alien and in space. The ending is very well handled as well, when they sort of sucker you into thinking the alien has been killed or left behind, and then there's one last twist at the end that Ridley must overcome. But yeah, over 40 years old now, and it has really stood up. It's a true original, and yeah, one of the best sci-fis ever, probably one of the best horror movies ever. And let's not forget one of cinema's great cats, and that is of course Jonesy, who quite rightly survives till the end. So Alien is my number 3, the original Alien. My number 2, as we get to the crunch, and I did say you could, or I did set this rule, then trilogies do count. So I've already had the Planet of the Apes trilogy elsewhere. That was pretty high. I think it was 12 if I can remember right. Pretty sure that's right. So another trilogy, and you won't be surprised considering how high I am on this, It's the Back to the Future trilogy, an absolute milestone in blockbuster and in sci-fi filmmaking. So we have the original from 1985, Part 2 from 1989, and Part 3 from 1990. And I guess I'm going to talk about the sequels here because I think it's accepted largely. The first film is an absolute classic, probably a masterpiece. Just does everything perfect. But there's obviously some debate over the sequel. There's some discussion about which is the best two or three. I think over time, certainly at the start, there was question marks at, well, are they really that good compared to the first one? And over time, I think people have grown to love them. And it's just a great trilogy all the way through. It's one of the most consistent trilogies of all time. As I let the phone ring out. Hello? Alright. Okay. Right. Okay. Okay. Yeah. Right. Okay. Okay. No problem. Alright. Good luck. Yeah. No problem. Okay. See you soon. Okay. Bye. 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 Okay. So I'm back. So yeah, one of the most consistent trilogies of all time, and I think each part kind of adds something a bit different. But I'm gonna make a case for the sequels. Now, I think the weak point is like the opening 15-20 minutes of Back to the Future Part 2. I think that takes a bit of time to really get into gear. I think the stuff, with them trying not to run into like their past selves, that's a little clunky. It gets a little bit too confusing and doesn't really add too much. So I would say the opening 20 minutes of Back to the Future 2 is the weakest 20 minutes in the trilogy. But once you get past that and you kind of get things rolling and on track with what they're doing with the story for that film, I think it's great. I think it's once again exciting and fantastic and tense, and a darker film. Actually, that's one of the things. I know some people actually think Part 2 is the best film, and maybe it is that darker edge than is the reason. But I'm going to argue for the sequels anyway. Not that I need to convince many people. There's the odd person out there that doesn't like them, but in general, most people agree it's a wonderful trilogy. But what I'll say about the sequel is they do that classic sequel thing where they're taking elements from the original film and they're just expanding on them. So they put little twists on them, which I'll talk about, but at the same time they are doing something different. It's just they're referencing back to the original and being consistent, giving the fans what they want, which you have to do. You have to still feel like you're part of the same trilogy of films. But at the same time, there's little twists, little differences. So I think that's exactly what you want from sequels. But so in number 2, you have the whole 3D technology. It's a great spectacle. You have, as I said, the darker edge. You have that classic like Trump-like villain, Biff Tannen, like the version of him. So some of that stuff gets really dark. And he's really terrifying. It's a great performance by him. But there's really tense moments. There's, again, really spectacular moments and visual effects. And as I said, once it gets going, I think it really, you get some really tense, just wonderful stuff. I love the little details, like the detail of the sports or the sports results book that then can be used for bad. So just the fact that something so small as like a book on like sporting results can be used for evil in the future. It's just one of these great like little hooks that just gives it this little something different. So Marty has to pursue that, but he's obviously like he's dodging around behind the car trying to grab at the book, and then he's in the office later with the principal, and the chair goes back on his hand as he's trying. Just stuff like that I just love as he's trying everything he can to get hold of this book. Great physical acting again by Michael J. Fox. That's one of the big reasons he got the role as Marty, because he just does the slapstick stuff so good, and he's just physically believable in the part. Obviously, he has a great relationship with Doc, but I love that stuff with the sports memorabilia book. So A Darker Edge, and then part 3, which just changes things again because the setting is completely different. You have the change up of the fact that they have to go at a different speed to be able to transport the DeLorean to the Wild West. And then you have this glorious prestige of the Wild West and of Western movies, which is just brilliant. So the gag about Marty calling himself Clint Eastwood. You have the moonwalk scene where Biff or Mad Dog Tannen, as he's shooting at him, Marty's doing the moonwalk, which of course doesn't exist yet, to dodge the but that's just brilliant. That might be one of my favourite scenes in the whole franchise, and just the look on Mad Dog's face. And again, great example of them just adapting things from the first film and just changing it slightly. So in the past films he didn't like being called Yellow. In this it's Mad Dog, don't call me Mad Dog sort of thing. So I absolutely love that stuff. And that they have a lot of fun with the pastiching of westerns and the western setting. And then we have to talk about Mary Sternberger as the love interest for Doc. First of all, she's a great actress. She's delightful in the role. I think it's another one where she is pastiching like the damsel in distress from those sorts of movies. So she's having a lot of fun, but at the same time, she's so charming and likable. You can't help but be into her and just see the appeal from Doc's point of view. And this again is a great example of something like the sequels add, because this is good character growth for Doc. The fact that he now has a romantic interest, and it throws up all these different things because he has to make this decision, because originally the plan is to fix time and then get the hell out of there within a certain time period. But it just shows you, I think it's almost like a metaphor for life, where it shows you then, well, suddenly matters of the heart can take over. You suddenly fall for a person and things can change, your plans can change, and it throws up all these dilemmas for Doc. Does he tell the truth? If he does, how the hell is she going to react to that? Does he not tell the truth? Does he just leave? Does he stay? Does he go? I mean, it throws up all these dilemmas, and it just adds to the drama and the tension, and it's just brilliant stuff. Very enjoyable, the third part. Love the ending once again. I don't think they could have done much more with it. I know there's this debate really. I think a lot of people. I think maybe some people think it's kind of goofy and cheesy, like the Wild West stuff in the third film, and so for a lot of people, part 2 is better. I actually think part 3 is better than 2. I would still say the original film is the best, but I actually think I might like part 3 a bit more than part 2. But that's just me personally. But it's an outstanding trilogy. It's really consistent. A great milestone in filmmaking, as I said. Great emotional journey and storytelling. And yeah, it's just the perfect film, the perfect trilogy, if you like. The storytelling of it and the emotional payoff to the whole thing. Great, amazing effects. Zemeckis is a great visual director. Great characters and dialogues. So that's my number 2, which is the Back to the Future trilogy, the whole trilogy. So there you have it. So before I get to my number 1 pick, which you may not expect, I'm going to run through the whole list. So 50-2, and here we go. Number 50 was Dune, David Lynch's Dune. Number 49, Fantastic Voyage from 66. 48 was Night of the Comet. 47, Star Wars Episode 4. Sorry, I had to do a double take. Episode 4, A New Hope. 46 was TerraVision. 45, Inner Space. 44, The Fifth Element. 43 was Quatermass and the Pit. I don't know why that was so hard to say. 42 was Tetsuo the Iron Man. 41, another Iron. I only just noticed this, 2 Iron related films in a row, but very different. The Iron Giant was 41. 40 was Total Recall, original. 39 was Silent Running. 38 was The Invisible Man, the original from 1933. 37 was Gattaca. 36 was Reanimator. 35 was Duncan Jones's Moon. 34 was Children of Men. 33 Save the Green Planet. 32 Arrival. 31 Star Trek IV The Voyage Home. 30 was Terry Gilliam's Brazil. Let's see. 29 was Close Encounters of the Third Kind. Oh, hang on. I might have to do this. Sorry. I'm goofing up all over the place today. So let's see if I can get this right. So 31 was Star Trek IV The Voyage Home. So we'll go from there. 30 was Brazil, Terry Gilliam's Brazil. A slight change. I was reading from an older list. So 29 was Invasion of the Body Snatchers from 1978. 28 was Close Encounters of the Third Kind. 27 Godzilla, the original Japanese film from the 50s. 26 was Donnie Darko. 25 was Mad Max 2 The Road Warrior. 24 Ghost in the Shell, the original anime. 23 was the original Solaris. 22 E.T. the Extraterrestrial. And 21 was Aliens. Into the top 20. 20 was Blade Runner The Final Cut. 19 Ghostbusters, original of course. 18, The Man Who Fell to Earth. 17, another Star Trek film, Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan. 16, Terminator 2, Judgment Day. 15, Joss Whedon's Serenity. 14, The Matrix. 13, Metropolis, all the way back in 1927, Fritz Lang's film. 12 was the Planet of the Apes trilogy, as in the modern Planet of the Apes trilogy. 11, RoboCop from 1987. Into the top 10, so we had Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind at 10. The Fly was number 9. The Thing was number 8. Videodrome was number 7. I'm so fucking this up. Jurassic Park was number 6. Terminator was number 5. As I rustle my papers. Number 3 was Alien. No, I haven't done number. God damn it. Number 4 was A Clockwork Orange. Number 3 was Alien. Number 2 was the Back to the Future trilogy. And in at number 1, my favourite science fiction movie, it's Stalker, the Andrei Tchaikovsky Stalker from 1979. So this is just one of these like oddities of a film that I just have this like vivid radical memory of seeing it at the cinema and just having my mind blown. It just challenging me on so many levels, like a visual level, the poetic level, just the philosophy of it and the ideas and how it almost looks like, in the best possible way, this like multi-layered sort of video game where you're like kind of going through different zones and layers and just almost like different chapters. It's very kind of fragmented like that. It's purposely like non-linear, sort of has a very simple like plot setup, but it does a lot of very different ideas. It's like a test of endurance. And it's one of those rare films that is so heavy with philosophy, and yet somehow it just works to perfection. You're just captivated. I mean, I was immersed in it. I can understand not everyone would have that experience. It's a very challenging, very niche sort of film. It's really distinct and just beautiful, but a film unlike any you might ever seen. It's just so different, but just the use of colours and the poetry of the whole thing. But somehow, even though it's meant to be like this quite cold, disconnected experience that's playing with all these different ideas, it just immersed me in the world. So it's nearly 3 hours long, but it didn't feel like it. It swept me along. I think the pacing is so like deliberately like metaphorical. Yeah, each scene there's just so much thought put into it. And as I said, it's so heavy with the philosophy, and normally that wouldn't work. Normally that would just come off as pretentious, but somehow it does work, and it's just genius. And it's one of those unforgettable cinema experiences. I saw it on the big screen a few years ago, and I think with a lot of Tchaikovsky's films, probably all of them, you have to see them on the big screen. But it's just something which has stuck with me and made me thought. And even if I don't understand it, which maybe is damn near impossible, it just works for me. It just stuck with me and is very distinct and unique. So well crafted, so thought provoking. You've got interesting characters and good actors too, and I think it's one of those films, if it doesn't add up, it really doesn't matter. It just works anyway. Yeah, just so vivid. Not only one of the great sci-fi films, but probably one of the most distinct, unique films ever in general. And obviously, this list of 50 films have been very varied, and there's been a lot of different, there's been a fair few blockbusters, more on the lighter side, some, very heavy in terms of themes and like politics and a mixture, and in between as well. But obviously this is a film I wouldn't watch as many times as like Back to the Future or Terminator. It's, those are more fun, lighter watches. They're different kinds of films that still make you think as well, but they're very different. They're not as heavy going as this. But that's why you have a list. That's why you have variety. And yeah, I think this film just stands out as, on the design level and just the flow of it and the mood. It just has its own unique mood. It kind of reinvents the language of cinema, which very few films do. So I think on those levels, it just stands out so much. So yeah, I confidently put it as my number one. That is Stalker by Andrei Tchaikovsky. I've of course said Solaris before, another Tchaikovsky film. So he was a very distinct like director when it came to the sci-fi genre. So they have it. Stalker's my number one. Let me know in the comments what your favourite science fiction movie is. You can do a full list, a top 50 if you want, or 20, 10, whatever you want. Or you can just say some of your favourites and comments on some of my lists. And let me know what other lists you'd like to do. I'll certainly do other genres like maybe horror, maybe thriller as well. That could be quite good fun. I also do decade list. I mean, pretty soon I'm gonna do my top 20 movies of the last decade, and I'll work my way backwards. But yeah, more list videos to come. So I hope you enjoyed this rundown of my top 50 science fiction movies in parts. I'll put the other parts in the description. But for now, I'm out of here. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you guys again soon. Goodbye.